What does it mean to be called crazy in a crazy world? Listen to Madness Radio, voices and visions from outside mental health. Hey everyone, just a quick announcement. We are very excited to be organizing Mad Camp, July 20th to 24th, 2023. Summer camp for mad people in the mountains of Northern California. Join us, support this vision. Check out madcamp.net and make sure to sign up for the mailing list for updates. Mad Camp, July 20th to 24th, 2023, madcamp.net.
Welcome to Madness Radio. I'm your co-host, Jax McNamara, and I am here with co-host Will Hall.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here with you, Jax.
And today we're going to be interviewing Karin Jervert. Karin Jervert is a U.S.-based artist, author, and psychiatric survivor. She is certified in ECPR and personal medicine. She currently serves as arts editor at Mad in America. Her artwork includes nonfiction essays, visual art, graphic narratives, and poetry that explore self-empowerment, nature and the sacred, normalization of suffering, and the power of creative expression to transform trauma, particularly trauma experienced as a result of forced psychiatric treatment. Her study of Buddhism, earth-based spirituality, ritual practice, and improvisational comedy find their way into her work as well. You can find Karin's work on the web at something-wonderful.net or on Instagram at Karin Jervert. Welcome. We're so glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to speak to the both of you.
That's a very impressive bio. There's a lot of really interesting, juicy stuff going on in there. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Me too. I was like, I want to hang out with this person.
We could have some tea.
We have some things in common.
Yeah.
We've been kind of thinking about it in terms of art and ritual practice, ceremony, earth-based spirituality, how all that fits together with visionary, altered, extreme states of consciousness. So this is right. This is like right in our home territory here, Jax,
yeah,
right?
Totally. And on that note, could you start off by just telling us a little bit about your journey into earth-based spirituality and ritual practice and how that intersects with your experiences as a psych survivor?
The best place maybe to start would be that about 2 years ago, I got pretty sick. Like I was withdrawing from psych meds for 2 or 3 years before that. I was on 5 different psych meds for many, many years. And in the withdrawal, to take those 2 journeys and stick them into one seems super easy. But when I try to voice it, it becomes a little harder.
Do you want to mention which drugs?
So it was, I was on Latuda, Lamictal, lithium, like PRN, Xanax, and what was the other one? Lexapro. And I think I was still on, they were trying me on ketamine, S-ketamine at the time as well. Like a whole, I mean, you know, so hard to remember every single thing that you were on at a certain period in time, because over the years I was on 17 different drugs. So
yeah, you've got covers almost every kind of class of meds except for maybe ADHD meds or something.
Yeah, I think the ADHD meds were the only ones I didn't do. I was thinking too, I was on LDN for a while, which was just like an experimental, like, you know, thing. They threw everything at me. But when I started withdrawing, I was on those sort of five meds. So, okay. So this is the interesting sort of introduction to like spirit and guides and different kind of things in that department. I started withdrawing from the drugs in, I think September 2019, just before the pandemic. Then the pandemic hits and I'm like on my own. I get laid off from my job. I was working at a bookstore, just like the dream job, right? I'm a big book lackey. I just love books. So being a book monkey was like the coolest thing in the world.
That's awesome. I worked in an independent bookstore in Northampton, Massachusetts when I was scheming the Freedom Center back in the day. So I totally relate to
Yeah,
it being kind of a dream job. In some ways, it was kind of a dream job.
Yeah. So basically, the space that was opened up through the pandemic, to be sort of in a sacred space on my own, creating a space in my home. That's the whole my whole home became like a studio that I was able to do what I wanted to do really for this amount of time. As part of my experience is with altered states and is voice hearing as well. So I was able to reintroduce myself to the diversity of my own mind after it being suppressed for so many years. So for 20 years, the voice hearing was this thing that I had to just destroy, eliminate, not engage with. But when I started withdrawing and it started returning, and I had the sort of sense of self where I was like, no, this is part of who I am. This is a diversity. I started engaging with it differently, almost as like I was being introduced to guides, being introduced to different aspects and energies of the universe, really. And it started slow with dreaming. Like I would be paying more and more attention to my dreams. And as I paid more attention to them as meaningful, they became more meaningful, right? It's almost like that's how reality works. Like if you pay attention to one thing, it becomes more of that thing, because that's how the generative nature, the manifestation of different things happens. You just pay more attention to it. It becomes more of that thing in a lot of cases, right? So, and dreaming was that way for me. So it became really a very strong experience, and just kept building and building as this general relationship that I was starting to have with what I started calling spirit. Then in August, I had a pretty deeply profound experience that was different from any of my other altered states, of course, because I had this framework now, right? That was healthy and nurturing and beautiful and profound. So when I stepped out into what would in the psychiatric industry have been called a crisis, it was actually this beautiful, miraculous connection with nature. And I started learning how to camp, and I started learning like survival in nature kind of skills, nature skills, things like that, all on my own. The real confidence that was built through that was just like so empowering, because you're out there like learning all this stuff on your own, doing these kind of really hardcore things that never thought you would do. The flip side of that was that I decided to go and do like my own journey in nature, where I was out camping somewhere, kind of remote. And I had a Navy veteran friend who took me out, who was not easy on me, guys, like not easy on me. It was a hard trip. And so she was in a cabin kind of far off, and I was sort of in a remoter area camping on my own. But I got really sick after I got home. When I got home, I basically just like could hardly walk for about 2.5 months. And I went to bed thinking I was going to die every single night, like that. I was just not going to wake up the next day. But what happened was I started to listen to Norse music, Norse prayers, Norse, like, because my heritage is Norse and Irish and English in that area. And I just was reading a book about Valkyries. And it was an anthropological book, and it was I dive into that shit sometimes. And all I could really do was read at the time. But there's a song, it's called Troll Abundant by I think you pronounce it Eivor. She's a singer, amazing voice. But I would listen to this song, and during those times where I was like, I'm not going to wake up. I'm just not going to wake up. I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to be dead in the morning. And this song, I tell you, was like my doorway into traveling in spirit. Like it was just this beautiful thing. Because of my connection to this music, I reached out to a friend who connected me to a shaman, and she focused on music. And I saw her, and then I did a 30-day practice where I had tea with spirit. And that's the story. The rest is history. It's like it's basically if I remember correctly, it's a spell, like a Norse song that's actually a spell. It's and Trollabundin is probably a word in
Wow.
Norse. So I don't know what it means. I think it might mean magician.
So you found yourself really ill, not being able to walk, and then how did you even find this song? Did you just were you seeking out something from your heritage and then you focused on it and then like wow, you find yourself like journeying, like shamanic journeying, like trance, astral travel kind of thing?
Yeah, it was sort of that book, the Viking book. It's called The Real Valkyrie. And it's a very interesting book about a grave site that they found that for, decades they thought was the grave site of a male general. But they found out it was a female Viking woman that, so they wrote this whole book about that. The idea that, gender roles in Viking communities were way different than we ever imagined them being. And I just was looking up different Viking songs and I found this one song.
Can you tell us about why it's been important for you to connect to like European indigenous ancestry? Because I remember
Yeah,
reading
yeah.
about that in some of your writing, and I personally really connected with that as someone who has kind of turned away from appropriating other cultures and their spiritualities as I've become more like politically aware of the nuances of these things. And then what's it like to turn towards my own heritage and discover what's there? And I'm curious how that has been for you.
When you think back and you read about the history of the indigenous people in Europe, I started to see, that the attempt to eradicate the narrative that nurtured the connection with the earth started and was exported to the Americas later, but started along and like the amplified the genocide became even harsher and higher level. But it was in Europe first that this type of indigenous wisdom was something that was targeted and was trying to be eradicated, right? So my own heritage was that was lost before we even got to these shores, right? And maybe the question I started asking myself was, what if the earth-based European ancestors that I have were the ones who landed here and met the indigenous people in the Americas? We might have had some kind of connection there where we could both have said, yes, this water is life. Yes, the earth is precious and must be, honored in these different ways. And our rituals would have had some sort of different kind of way where we might have had a different history, right? Maybe. I don't know. That's just a question I asked myself. And the idea that I would come to, the American soil, which is not mine. I mean, I'm here as a colonizer, right? And I'm also a colonized mind, coming here because of the hundreds and hundreds of years of history where my earth-based indigenous wisdom was eradicated prior to that. That if I don't reconnect to that, then there's not much I'm coming here with, right? I'm coming here with either the instinct to appropriate somebody else's connection to the earth or with the instinct to continue with the capitalist consumption that which replaced that earth-based wisdom, right? So it was important to me to really drop into my bones and into my DNA to say, what is my story? What is my connection to not just earth, but to, because there's so many different layers, right? There's so many layers because one, I'm not on land that is my own indigenous land. It is a land that my ancestors cruelly conquered and stole, right? So there's that story that lives in my bones. But what if I can somehow heal in my own heart, my own soul, the colonized mind that I myself have through generations and generations internalized? Maybe I have something to offer here. Maybe I could meet the people that are trying to save this planet with something deeply valuable, right? Who are we and how can we heal together? Like.
So tell us about how this process unfolded. Was it a struggle? Were you really fighting to kind of find a different relationship to all the things inside of you that were being suppressed by the meds? And then how did you kind of come to this place where you're basically developing a shamanism that's out of your own roots?
Yeah, holy moly, yeah. It was like I think I phrased it before, where it was introducing myself again to this core diversity of who I am, this core diversity of my soul, of my body, of everything. So it was a deep practice in a compassion that I had not been taught, that I had no reference point for, that I had to fight for. So, with the voices, for me, I have several different frameworks that help me understand. And one of them, one of which is, the idea of having a relationship with something other than myself. But then a lot of there's still room for the fact that some of my relationship with my voices are that they're mirrors of parts of myself. So the diversity of that experience, I need several frameworks to work my way through them. But I think like the compassion was just a key point for me, where I had to relearn how to look at something that was deeply terrifying in facing it, in that aloneness of not really having any kind of good framework for it, having only the framework of disease and eradication and evil and all this stuff. So learning that compassion was really how it worked.
Yeah, that was really important. And what you said about, okay, there's an idea that voices are parts of ourselves, but I think that kind of becomes almost like a dogma in itself. It becomes like a reductionist. It's almost like a psychologization of the experience, because I mean, what my experience has been, it sounds like yours too, is that actually they can be spirits, they can be beyond us, they can be not reflections, not just of ourselves, but reflections of the fact that we're part of something way bigger, primarily the earth and primarily our ancestors. So that's kind of how did you discover that? Did you just sort of by yourself? I mean, how did you sort of figure that out? Because a lot of like the message often among trauma healing, for example, and in the context of therapy, is really to sort of see it biographically and see different voices as expressions of you're the person who persecuted you, or the person who's trying to protect you, or the different parts of yourself that are your own personal story.
It's a good question, because and it's funny I say this a lot, is like some of the shit you just can't make up. You just can't make it up, how you'll hear a voice and then 5 minutes later the thing will happen. Or like I know that I don't know. So that's the thing, is right, the stigma around even saying that, right, is like so deep, because people, it's not intellectual, it's not rational, it's not based in this material reality and how we understand it, like there's no such thing as or that the people who say this kind of stuff are charlatans, or like all this other,
or that recovery is like coming back to reality. Like, it doesn't sound like, because I have that experience, like, for, if you want to call it recovery, it wasn't that I went back to believing and connecting with this reality. It's more like I continued to go into a different reality, a bigger reality, but I had a different relationship to it. It wasn't as frightening, overwhelming, oppressive as it had been. But I kind of I tried. I bought the story from psychiatry for a while, and then I was trying to kind of get back. I was hiding these parts of myself. I wasn't connected to other people who had the same experience. I was sort of like trying to function in the normal. And then it was only when I turned that on its head and said, actually, no, so-called normal reality isn't what I want to go back to. That's just one reality of many realities. And I, for whatever reason, seem to be drawn to and pulled into altered states. And what if I start to think of them differently? And I learned at some point that this idea of dissociation, I think it was when I was doing my training in process work, we were talking about how dissociation, which we think of in a totally pathologized way, it's like, oh, you're leaving your body, you're leaving reality. Well, actually, dissociation is association to somewhere else. So where is that elsewhere? Because then it sort of clicked to me like, wait a second, these are not just catatonic, depressed, dissociated, frozen states. This is journeying. It may be out of control, but it sounds like that's sort of what you went through, was like this initiation into seeing your pathologized states that you had tried to put down as actually initiation into seeing them as actually places that you go, different realities that you go. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. And like, as you're talking, I'm thinking about all the times that I sort of framed it that way, where I was like, I would take a step in and I would take a step out, and I would learn how to travel back and forth. And that as that got easier, and then I think in that too, there was like a sense of integration where I had to realize that I could live in both, or maybe both worlds. Because I also say, like,
that's right.
I have three worlds going on in my being, my existence, and at all times, right? And it's almost like I'm watching three movies all the time. It's trying to keep track of all of them. And the one that is most important, I think, that not most important, but like becomes important because of how other people treat people like us, is you got to keep track of this one and how well you're integrating the others into this one, right? Because you're like, well, if I slip up in that, then, I could get picked up and thrown in the paddy wagon, like whatever. But I think the skill of traveling and learning that you can, the only thing that happened was when I was 21, I had no story. I had no narrative, no framework for what happened to me, and no support, really. There was, like, I always think about, hell, like if we had elders that could have stepped in and said, this one, this one's in trouble. We got to tell her the stories. We got to tell her how this works and has worked for millennia, right? Millennia. I don't even know what millennia actually is in a number, but I'm sure a long time.
Yeah. Makes me, when you said about living in multiple films, because I have a very big connection to the film The Matrix. And someone asked me, like, Will, how many times have you seen The Matrix? And I thought, I think I'm still watching.
I'm still watching.
Like right now, I'm still watching it.
Right.
I never stopped watching The Matrix. And that's, of course, the films are kind of like how we dream as a culture. But I think that's something that's really crucial. It sounds like that was key for you. You were sick, and then you started journeying, and then you found like a mentor, a shamanic teacher. And I kind of also want to ask you, like, how did you know that teacher was actually right for you? Because the problem is that it's not always true that just because someone says, oh, I'm an elder, this is how it works, that they actually know how it works for you. Your path is going to be very, at least what I see is that's the advantage of a modern society, is that we're not stuck in super rigid one way or no way. We have a lot of possibilities that are open to us, so we can really be much more kind of oriented towards individual, although that becomes individualism itself. But how did you know that your teacher was the right path for you?
Well, here's the thing.
What was the teaching anyway? What exactly was it that you learned?
So here's the thing, is that I am extremely cynical. about
Uh,
I I don't. So when I was this woman, I was suggested to see her. My plan wasn't to settle in and have a teacher. I just wanted to try it, and that's what happened. Really, is that who my teacher really was was after this shamanic journey. One of the messages that I received in this imaginational realm, whatever visionary realm, right, was that I was to sit and have tea. I was to make tea for spirit at my altar every day for 30 days and just sit and drink my tea, make some tea for her. And that's it. That was my teacher. I didn't stay with the shaman that I did that first journey with. I literally had the ride of my life, having tea with spirit for 30 days.
Amazing.
So,
It makes me think of I think there's a Tibetan story. I always get the Buddhist stories wrong, so forgive me, but there's some Tibetan story about the Padmasambhava, the Buddhist saint, the Tibetan saint. He
mhm.
was besieged by demons, and so he invited the demons in for
Yeah, he
tea.
puts his
Hmm.
and I think he also puts the last one is the hardest one to get rid of. He puts his head in the demon's mouth. Yeah.
So making friends or being curious or being open or making, because I mean when I was in the hospital, they asked me, "Are you?" Because I would be completely withdrawn. I wouldn't, and they would ask me, "Are you hearing voices and having intrusive thoughts?" And I would at least be able to say, "Yes, that's what's happening." But then that was the end of it. There was never, "Oh,
Mhm.
what are they saying? What do they sound
Yeah.
like? What do you want to say back to them? What can you draw them? Can you relate?"
Yeah.
There was none of that
No.
actual inviting them in for tea. And then
For tea. Yeah.
I'm also thinking about the word demon actually is a kind of a corruption of the Greek daimon,
Mhm.
which is a word that actually means like guiding spirit or muse, or it's like a
Mhm.
spirit that helps you find your destiny by sort of wrestling with
Yeah.
the daimons.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you stuck with this ritual for 30 days, and
What was the outcome after 30 days? How
yeah.
did that practice impact you and how did that play out in your life?
Well, I think that it has a lot to do with me, how healthy I've become.
Yeah.
I think that the journey that I took in those 30 days, which was I would make tea every morning, and then I have a fire pit in my backyard, and I would bring so the tea that I made for spirit, I would pour into another vessel, and then I would bring that out into the fire plate at the fire pit. And there was a lot more to it. A lot of ritual storytelling was going on in that and those rituals, but and basically that was what it was. But the getting up, the having a routine around the tea, the reverence around the tea, like there was so much about this, and I've done a lot more work around the tea making, and I'm even doing a graphic narrative called Tea and 10,000 Things, where I do these comics of having tea with these different characters, like tea with dream characters, tea with different gods and goddesses, or even just regular people in your life. But so the tea thing has sort of taken on a life of its own, but in the beginning, I really feel to a certain extent, whether you look at these, a voice hearing experiencing as part of yourself or part of an external energy, a spirit or something like that, is that for me, depending on how I was able to source a compassion for and engaging, like you said, Will, like engaging with them in a more curious way, the more that the relationship was about getting me well, helping me get well and have a better routine, have a better life, take better care of myself. Like a part of it too was there was a big focus on water.
Mm.
So water and fire were sort of my first two elements that I was really working with. in the fire pit in the back. I had fire pits like almost every night for a long time. And then the water, one of my main voices would always remind me about it started with the conservation of water and just the reverence for water and what water meant and what it was. And then researching what water was as far as like its direction, its nature, its essence, like, its emotional power, like all those kind of things. So it just opened a door to like a new investigation of life. Like it was all these other stories opened up for me where I was like, oh, this feels like wellness to me. Like this feels like how I am going to be able to embrace my diversity, embrace who I am, be healthy, be powerful, be empowered, and come here, give the gift I've come here to give, which is what we all have to give, which is ourselves,
It makes me think of some of the reading I was doing of things I think that you sent us just about the power of stories. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about that, about how that shows up in your life.
As an artist, I don't know, Jax, you might be able to, corroborate. I don't know the word collaborate.
Corroborate.
Corroborate. It's a hard word to say for me always. My whole life. Never been. Yeah. It's like and Will, you too, like as an artist and, there's this metaphorical mind. It's a really like you look at the world and the world isn't what it is. It's something else. It's a story rather than a stagnant thing. Like it's a dynamic relationship with a thing rather than it just being the thing. So say for the example, one of the examples I made was water. And so water can just be this object or phenomenon in the material world. But I think for people with metaphorical tendencies, let's call them, they become storytellers. Those elements and those energies in our environment become storytellers. And that's through metaphor. So, and that's through engaging with it in a way that informs human life, not just human life, life in general. So for me, when, you look at water, it's like water reminds me to be who I am and just continue as I am. Because at the essence, water just does water. All the elements just do the elements, right? But water just does water in a way that really deeply touches me because it's not fighting current. It's not fighting, it's going around rather than through or whatever, it's
liquid water. It keeps flowing. It takes the shape of whatever it's in or whatever, but it somehow is more powerful. It can defeat stone. It will create grooves right through stone. Another thing I like about, because we think of water like liquid water, that water is only liquid for a very small temperature range compared to how hot and how cold the universe is. So apparently liquid water is quite unusual, quite rare element for state of water. H2O is around, but so there's something very precious. And of course, we're mostly water, and we've spent our whole, since we were not even humans, we were connected to water. We have to find water. We come out of water. So there's something really, and then a lot of the metaphors of being able to flow with and respond to and shape yourself and be flexible and fluid. And so, yeah, water is really, and also it's just wonderful. Like just being in water is really wonderful thing to do that we don't maybe do enough of.
And all the elements have stories that can be told and ways that it can inform our lives. There's just so much in, like, say, fire, where you could see, the transformative power of even just something like rage, or passion or power, anything like that. So every element seems to me to have a really important story to tell. And then the ritual storytelling is and storytelling and art making is even more profound in my experience because let's maybe talk about art making really quick. It's like the world of the imagination and being able to take a story and it feels really powerful and profound to be able to say, here's this emotional experience, here's where I want it to go, and I'm going to enact that in an art form. I'm going to enact what that wish is for this to transform.
Can you give an example or maybe describe like a art piece you're thinking of that you've created, or how that, because I'm sure people are really fascinated with what the details of these processes are. Yeah.
I did, and it's on my Instagram account. It's I'm a huge fan of Tori Amos, right? And I went to
Tori Amos, the rock star, Tori
the rock
Amos.
star, Tori
Okay.
Amos. Yeah. So the last concert I went to hers was in Philly, and I was in the front freaking row because she got me in the front row, which was amazing. There was a moment in the show where I felt an aloneness that was based on the trauma of being put in solitary confinement during 9/11, where it felt to me that I was alone in this experience of having such a hard time being a voice here. Like, it was like, I can't be open about being a voice here. Like, it's takes every bit of my effort to just be strong and in my power as a voice here.
You were in solitary confinement in a psychiatric hospital.
Yes. Yeah. During 9/11. Yeah. Which was really hard. But I did this series of drawings, and I wish we were on a video that I could show the audience. You know,
we can link to them. We can.
Yeah, I would love
create
that.
a link. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, in general, it's the story of the transformation of this aloneness and this feeling of being isolated and put in solitary, and transforming it and washing it away with all these alchemic sort of, like, I almost explained it as a Rube Goldberg visual art alchemic transformation of this emotion. Yeah. So that's a good description for the podcast, right?
So like this machine with all these different alchemical, like a laboratory kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's in a series of, I think, 7 drawings. But by the end, it's just a wave of water washing it all away. It's that, between that storytelling and just that hope for transformation that you have when you sit down at your art desk and you have a feeling that you want to put on paper. There's just so much power in being able to say, I'm going to let this flow and move and change. And then doing that through storytelling.
I'm thinking of, this is not something I talked about very much, but I remember talking about it in a training many years ago and immediately regretting talking about it, but then realizing I was glad I talked about it. So I'll talk about it now because I think it's, but it's a drawing that I would make over and over and over and over and over and over again. All my crayon boxes would have, all the crayons are pristine except that the red and the black were these little nubs of crayons, because those were the 2 colors in the drawing. And the drawing was of kind of like a figure that's lying prone, lying down, kind of just flat out, and then this horrible toothed beast that's just, and that's looming over this, and I would just draw this over and over and over again. And then so I drew it in this training I was doing because I wanted to talk about voices. And I was saying, like, when I first was drawing this, it just was the only thing I could think of drawing. It just didn't make any sense. And then I started to see it as a representation of just how flat out dominated by life I've been, just like crushed, like this life is just crushing me. And then I started to so that was how it was for a long time. It's like this thing is coming at me. It was like a personification, and gave me some distance from it. And then I shifted and I started to see it as connected to a memory that I had, a surgical experience that I had, which was very terrifying for me. And I realized, wow, this is like someone, because there was very sharp teeth and very like, oh wow, this is like a memory of a traumatic surgical experience that I had. And then I started to look at it and this is over years that what I would see in this image. And the last like 4 or 5 years, I started to see it as there's actually no violence happening in the image. It's just me lying down, and then me, if all of it is parts of myself, right? There's this figure lying down, which is me, and there's also this looming figure with these teeth and claws. And I realized there's no violence actually happening. I thought, what if the big dark monster with the teeth and claws is actually protecting the one that's lying down?
Yeah.
Then I started to go, well, like, what if actually it's the big dark creature is me when I'm sleeping, going out and being powerful in my dreams and being able to imagine and being able to travel and journey. And so it's kind of like an example. I think it was the same image, but it was like the art making or the creativity was in the interpretation of the story that I was. And then I'm thinking like maybe now that I've told it on Madness Radio, it'll change some more.
Man, Will, that is the alchemy of art, baby. That was beautiful. Like that is so what it is, because like that was just thank you for sharing that, because it's just like that's a perfect example of how one can transform an experience like that through visualizing and telling a story.
It was almost like it wasn't me transforming it. It was completely spontaneous. I just was compelled to create this thing, and I just felt like, oh God, I've got a whole box of crayons. Why am I only using 2 colors? I felt like a failure even in creating this thing. And then I started to see things from it. And then I'll come across it in my journals. Like, wait, so okay, what do I see? Wow, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It's all, and then so it's interesting that is that something that you experience, that it's part of it is the actual intentional ceremony and the commitment, like I am going to have tea, or is also some of it just like this spontaneous thing that starts to happen? I'm curious also, Jax, if you experience that, like with your paintings and visual art, does it kind of just start to come like it needs to come on its own? And
I mean, I definitely find that the art kind of comes when it needs to come. Yes. I mean, I also very, very frequently, because my art a lot of it is abstract. It has like some representational elements, but a lot of it is abstract. And so people always want to know, where does it come from? And what does it mean? That's what they want to know when you make abstract art. Where does it come from? What does it mean?
We'll link to it so people can look at it with the show description.
And like
too.
The honest answer for me is I often don't know where it comes from. Like I often make my art and I look at it and I'm like, this is weird.
Oh my God, yes.
I make weird art.
It's beautiful.
I mean, it's beautiful,
beautiful, weird.
But it's like
it's a lot of circles, a lot of constructions,
kind of mandala type shapes and compositions, but it's kind of psychedelic at times. The compositions, like it's weird art. It's not linear at all, and it's something that I love about it comes from the music that I am listening from, the relationships between colors and textures and shapes and sounds. It comes from everything I've ever lived through and every road trip I ever took. Like it's all of these things together doing whatever it is that they do.
Would you say you're in an altered state, or even a mild altered state, when you are art making?
I'd say it depends. Not necessarily, but sometimes. I mean, I'm synesthetic. I have synesthesia, so for me, like numbers and letters have colors, and music I can often see. So in terms of like altered state that is present, it's more that synesthetic piece of like, if I'm listening to Beach House in that particular song, like those particular sounds, this is the texture that they make on.
Were you always like that? Were you growing up?
Yeah, I've always been like that.
Synesthetic?
Yeah. I didn't know it wasn't a thing everybody had until I stared talking about it with someone I was dating. And I was like, yeah, A is red and B is blue and C is yellow. And she was like, what? You're synesthetic. And I just thought everybody had that.
My brother's a visual artist, and he is the same.
Oh, really?
Synesthesia. Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, Jax, I wonder, I completely have a similar experience where sometimes you like look at what's on the page and you're like, who the heck just did that? like, especially with my poetry, sometimes I'll write poetry and I'll be like, whoa, okay, what? Like this is beautiful and great, but I don't know that I wrote it, like there's a really, really strong feeling that, and so many poets and artists and stuff like that have said this before, where they almost disown their own art, saying, I didn't do this.
Yeah.
Something came through me here, and here it is. And here's, and I was just the scribe or the transcriber.
Okay, well, here's a question. Is everybody an artist then? Is it, if you don't feel like something is just coming through you, can you cultivate that? Can you open yourself? Can you create a way of, I mean, can everybody be an artist?
I think so. I think
everybody can.
I think we all are and I think we all are as human beings. I think people so often put creativity in this like special little place, where only certain people can reach it and certain people can have it and certain people are good at it. But it's just a basic element of human beings. It's just, literally, you could not be here if you were not creative. And science is creative, art is creative, math is creative. I think we way too often make art an elite thing.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I mean, I think in the like, what is like, who is special or not special in like having these abilities, I think that some people are more open to non-ordinary consciousness. And as I think maybe the case with all three of us at times, may not even have a choice about when non-ordinary consciousness, intrudes or opens up, depending on your point of view about it. And I think some people are much more closed and spend a lot more time in like consensus reality, and that if that's what you're dialed into, that it can be a lot harder to open up enough to make art. But I don't think that means that everybody can't make art. I just think sometimes you have to do the work to loosen the bonds of consensus reality a bit, and to allow things to move through you, and I
absolutely.
I feel like I and most of the people I know who are in this movement that we are all part of, like I have very thin skin. I have very thin membranes.
Yeah.
And some people just naturally have thicker skin, and they probably do a much better job of like holding a job and doing their taxes.
God bless them.
God bless. Yeah.
I need a little bit more of that, actually.
It's something I've had to learn over the years.
Me too. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I've always wondered, as somebody who works with people, and making art and stuff, there is such for some people, there is such a resistance to opening those doors and sort of making that boundary a little bit more porous. And it's walking with people as they learn to be curious in those states is an interesting thing to do.
I'm wondering if do you want to read some of your poems or writing, or?
Oh yeah, sure.
Is that something particularly calling to you want to read?
Well, yeah, no, I would. I was actually thinking that, but I was trying to be like, I didn't want to come off as like, let me read my poems.
Oh no.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Let's do
All
it.
right.
Totally, let's do it.
Yeah, actually I have like two that I think that that would be cool to read.
I think it'd be interesting if you could read it and then also tell us maybe some of the process around it.
So these poems were a journey for me, and are very seeped in dreaming and journeying, and a particular journey that I've been taking over the last couple of months around the rivers. So we talked a bit about water, and it seems that water is a thing for me. And particularly the river water and oceans, like where I do these healing rituals and exchanges where, with the water systems or water, different rivers and oceans, where I'm trying to heal sort of my own life's trauma and my own and the sort of collective trauma that I have any access to understanding, and my generational, going back to my ancestors. I'm trying to heal that. So basically there's a journey I've taken where this is my thing is I'm going to try to get to the Pacific Ocean from the Atlantic. But I mean, this is one of those things where it's not as weird as it sounds. It's really just taking vacations at different rivers and doing a few little like ritual thank yous and grief prayers and moving on, right? So this is not it's so hard to talk about in a way that you feel that the world's not going to look at you and say like, okay, honey, what are you doing?
Yeah, but this is Madness Radio. Our tolerance for weird is really, really, really
Yeah,
high.
good. Yeah, and no, but thank goodness for people
Mhm.
like you guys, because
Mhm.
it's like people like us can talk about this stuff and be open and honest and feel comfortable in a safe space, talking about this. But anyway, so these poems came from a series of dreams that I had and some work that I did with the rivers. And this artist that I'm working with in Australia, her name is Kylie Cooper, which actually we've worked together for about a year, a little bit more. And we're actually collaborating on an event. It's like a group art making project. And sure, Will, you can put the link to that in the.
Yeah.
So anyway, this particular poem is based on a tattoo I have on my chest. So it's the other way around. The tattoo is based on the poem.
Nice.
So it's called A Woman, a Wolf, and a Whale, a prayer for the elders of story and song. As the land is set ablaze and the people's souls are aflame, we lay awake at night listening for a song of peace, for a song of grief, so we can finally weep for what was lost, for what we forgot. But the only sound is the roaring of the sea at the edge of everything. Underneath the water, the whale sings for healing. She knows that the fire eats the air, but she and the water are one. She knows her song is filled with sorrow, and she knows its purpose and its power. Somewhere, the wolf howls to the moon of Hecate, calling on the leaders of the lost. She knows her song is one of solitude, knowing she will always vie for life and never be sacrificed. She knows there's no disguise of harm clever enough to make her an offering. And she knows her purpose and her power. Somewhere, a woman smiles at Christ's cross. Somewhere at the edge of dreams, she sits on one arm of it, swinging her feet, while her ancestors dance below to the beat. She knows her people have nowhere to put their sin these days. No coin or priest, not even in the bodies of their brothers or the wombs of their daughters, or tossed into the void of death. No, they must tend to it themselves and use songs like magic again. And she knows the purpose and the power of her song. A woman, a wolf, or a whale who knows the purpose and the power of her voice can only put it to use.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little about the creation of that, or what you're hoping that we're going to get from it?
Oh my God, this one just bugged me until I wrote it down. It was just I was being harassed basically in the middle of the night.
That's about how it works. Yeah.
I was completely harassed. It was literally like I was exhausted, and it was during that period of time where I was, deep in dreaming and doing the tea with the spirit and all this other stuff. And it just wouldn't leave me alone. And so it was really a kind of a one shot and then some editing, one shot at like 2 a.m. that I really wanted to be sleeping, but
it really wanted to be written.
But it really wanted to be written. Yeah. So, basically, for me, I do see it as just, it's a gift for which, I don't know, there's a lot of the art that I think does the work in the world that it needs to do. It doesn't have anything to do with how I feel. It needs to be acting. It's more like here it is, and it's free to do what it's meant to do. And
Yeah.
so it's more an offering than something that I really would say, I have any wishes for, or,
Yeah. I hear I hear a lot of grief in that poem. And also there's this longing for power and longing for something.
mm,
And yeah, I just really, because we're talking about ancient traditions and ancestors and the earth, and then the context, of course, is the burning and the collapse and the crisis and the catastrophe that we're in. And I also noticed there's a cameo by Jesus Christ
Yeah.
yes, there
in
is.
there.
Yeah, he's in there. Yeah, or at least his cross. He's not.
Can you
Yeah.
say something about that, because I think I liked hearing Christ in there, and
Yes.
I'll tell
Yeah.
you why. Because I think sometimes people think it's either or. Either you're in the shamanism, let's connect with our Viking indigenous roots, or you're in the.
Mm,
But actually, most indigenous people in the Americas are connected to Christianity, and there's been like this alchemy of
mm,
reinventing those
yeah. Yeah.
symbols and that spirit for its own, the Virgin
Yeah.
Mary and its own purposes that are
Yeah.
connected with. Can you say something about how you,
Sure.
or did Jesus just kind of show up uninvited
No,
into
no, actually,
that?
yeah. I'll say, even though I recognize the sort of the very real harm that the Christianization of a lot of things has done,
Hmm.
and I've heard it said this way before by someone I respect, she said, I have a lot of time for Jesus.
Mm.
Like I've got some time for Jesus. Like there's a lot of really wonderful, profoundly beautiful spirituality in in Christianity. There just is. But, I think there's also this rigidity around how we're supposed to interpret it, right? There's only one way,
Hmm.
apparently, to take, Jesus's teachings, or any of the subsequent, Christian teachers, or spiritual people. So I don't know. I mean, like I said, I have a lot of time for the love and spirituality of Christianity, my kind, my Christianity, how I see it, and each person is and should be able to interpret the spiritualities of their choice, how they choose. So, it's just basically for me, like I said, although I do recognize the harm that was done, and sometimes like I'll scream, like, to in an argument about, I don't know, when they pass the some laws or something, like I'll just be like, who I'm pissed at? Jesus. I'm pissed at Jesus. Like, why didn't he see, that his teachings would do this, or that meant people would do this with his teachings? Like, wasn't he supposed to be all knowing and, great and big and,
Well, it's interesting because actually that is part of the teachings, is that there's the coming of the Antichrist.
oh
So
yeah.
that's a way I've kind of related
Yeah.
to that, is that there's, but I mentioned, I made a kind of a joke earlier about there's a very high tolerance for weird on
Mm,
Madness Radio, and there is, but I think the reason that it's tolerable is because it's authentic, and it's really, there's nothing
yeah.
phony. Like what's so striking listening to your spirituality is that this is absolutely not a template that you grabbed from
Mm,
someone you're just regurgitating. This is something that is deeply, deeply sourced
mm,
in your own very hard fought struggle, coming
yeah.
off of medication and coming to terms with this wild state of mind. And that's, to me, that's really what it's all about. If it's authentically, deeply part of something that comes from within someone, that's what makes it
Yeah.
tolerable. Someone just starts repeating because
Mhm.
they're afraid not to, or they've been told to. That's when I tune out.
I think that something I've lived by, whether knowingly or not, since I was a kid, was that um, there's so much we're not allowed to talk about. And that the courage to me was talking about it, putting it to words, putting it into art, putting it into poetry, putting into, paintings, whatever. It was, for me, there was just some drive to say, oh, I can't talk about that. Hey, let's talk about that. Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I don't know why or how that came up. It was just, I'm just tired of being silenced. I'm tired of having these things live in me and swim around inside in this like pool of shame, and just not be able to work them out, because that's half the reason we're in the state we're in, is because we're hiding all this stuff, and it needs to be aired and healed and transformed. And the only way, in my vision of things, is that the way to transform things is through putting it into the world and letting it get mashed up, letting it get, letting the dialogue of other people work it through. It's like, I don't see any other way that those parts of us that are destroying us can be transformed. It's just the artist in me, I guess. But
Yeah.
Beautiful. Oh, I know what I was thinking of asking. I was thinking of asking if you had any advice for any people who might be at the beginning of a journey, that they're, struggling with medications and they're wondering how to have a relationship with all these things in their head or not in their head. And
yeah.
they have maybe an inkling or an intuition that maybe there's art and maybe there's visionary states and shamanism somewhere there. Do you have thoughts about what, I know advice is a tricky word, but
Yeah, because it's so individual. And
maybe it's not a good question, that you don't have to dive in if it
no,
doesn't
no, no,
feel
no.
natural.
No, I think it's important to me to answer just in this one way, is I think it's important to find support, because we don't have the story and the narrative anymore that is easily accessible for these altered states and for this diverse experience of mind, where we are living in those three worlds that we talked about before, or the three movies are running in our heads all the time, or all these ways that we experience this I think Jax called it like what did you call it, Jax? Like the like
The non-ordinary consciousness.
Non-ordinary consciousness. Yeah.
In between land.
In between land. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's how it feels all the time. But I think there's this sense that find support, because and find the stories, even if it's looking up the mythologies, ancient mythologies, looking up stories of other and making that connection, that the label of mental illness is not necessarily helpful in this context, because if you're a teacher or a shaman or a visionary or an artist of and connected to a spiritual practice, like, those people are often framed in a different context of spiritual practitioner, right? It's not this person is mentally ill, or this, that, and the other thing. It's that this person was a spiritual teacher and they dreamed things and they heard this voice and they heard, so it's like the context there is making the connection that maybe this is not disease, maybe this is not illness, that this is something that's a diversity of mind that has been present in the human race, in the human species, since the beginning of time. So making that connection, finding support so that you can find the stories of living with and making positive change in the world through these experiences. It just creates a world where you can live as yourself and as who you are and in your basic essence, instead of trying to fight it. So I just encourage those two things, find the stories and find the support. Oh my goodness, Will, you got me to share some pretty deep stuff here. I'm I'm just having one of those moments, the thin skin moments of
I
Totally.
hear you. Yeah. I still have those moments with Madness Radio for sure.
Yeah.
So
but I'm happy to, because like, this is who I am, like these are the things that I want to share, and that I'm scared to share, like. And whenever, my mother always used to say to me, like, if you're frightened of something, then you have the most to learn from it. And like,
thanks, Mom. That's pretty good.
Yeah, my mom's had some great things. So whenever I fear something, I'm like, all right, got something to learn from here. And I used to be afraid of whales, and now I faced my whale fear. And anyway, that's a whole nother story. Yeah.
So if our listeners want to find out more about you and contact you and know what you're up to, where should they look?
I think the best way to do that would be to either contact me on Instagram at karin.jervert, or just I have a contact form on my website at something-wonderful.net.
Take it away, Jax.
What am I supposed to say?
Well, if we're following Madness Radio dogma, you would thank Karin and then reread the bio.
Oh, I can do that.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
All right, let me just pull the bio back up. Well, thanks so much, Karin, for coming on Madness Radio today. It's been really great to speak with you, and I think our listeners will get a lot out of this conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Karin. It's been great.
Thank you so much for having me.
And for folks who've just been tuning in, Karin Jervert is a US-based artist, author, and psychiatric survivor. She is certified in ECPR and personal medicine. She currently serves as arts editor at Mad in America. Her artwork includes nonfiction essays, visual art, graphic narratives, and poetry that explore self-empowerment, nature, and the sacred, normalization of suffering, and the power of creative expression to transform trauma, particularly trauma experienced as a result of forced psychiatric treatment. Her study of Buddhism, earth-based spirituality, ritual practice, and improvisational comedy find their way into her work as well. You can find Karin's work on the web at something-wonderful.net or on Instagram at karin.jervert.
Hey everyone, just a quick announcement. We are very excited to be organizing Mad Camp, July 20th to 24th, 2023. Summer camp for mad people in the mountains of Northern California. Join us, support this vision. Check out madcamp.net and make sure to sign up for the mailing list for updates. Mad Camp, July 20th to 24th, 2023, madcamp.net. You've been listening to Madness Radio, voices and visions from outside mental health. Madness Radio host is Will Hall, producer is Nina Packabush. Madness Radio is an affiliate of Mad in America Radio, broadcasting on KBOO in Oregon, sponsored by Portland Hearing Voices and the Icarus Project, and syndicated on the Pacifica Network. Madness Radio is online at kboo.fm/madnessradio and at madinamerica.com.